Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Darren trudged towards the gymnasium, his footsteps echoing off the linoleum floors. He'd reluctantly agreed to chaperone the school dance in Miss Watkins's place, despite his aversion to such events. The thought of spending his Friday night surrounded by hormonal teenagers made him cringe, but he couldn't bring himself to say no to her request. As he neared the gym doors, the muffled thump of bass grew louder. Darren paused, straightening his tie and smoothing down his slightly rumpled dress shirt. He'd rushed home after the last bell to change, not wanting to look like the stuffy English teacher he usually portrayed. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into a sea of swirling lights and pulsing music. The gymnasium had been transformed into a makeshift nightclub, complete with a DJ booth and refreshment tables lining the walls. Clusters of students writhed on the dance floor, while others huddled in small groups, gossiping and laughing. Darren made his way to the punch bowl, nodding awkwardly at a few students who recognized him. He poured himself a cup of the sickeningly sweet concoction, wishing it contained something stronger to help him endure the night ahead. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't expect to see you here." He turned to find Jessica Chen, one of his brightest students, smiling up at him. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate updo, and she wore a shimmering blue dress that made her look far older than her 17 years. "Ah, hello, Jessica. I'm filling in for Miss Watkins tonight." "That's too bad. We were all looking forward to seeing her let loose on the dance floor." Darren chuckled, trying to imagine his prim and proper colleague busting a move. "I'm afraid you'll have to settle for my 2 left feet instead." Jessica's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Well, maybe we can convince you to show off your moves later, Mr. T." Before Darren could formulate a response, Jessica's friends called her away. He watched her disappear into the crowd, feeling a twinge of nostalgia for his own high school days. Had he ever been that young and carefree? As the night wore on, Darren found himself growing increasingly bored and restless. He'd broken up 2 heated makeout sessions in dark corners and confiscated a flask of vodka from a giggling group of seniors. The novelty of chaperoning had long since worn off. Glancing at his watch, he realized there were still 2 hours left before the dance ended. With a sigh, he decided to sneak out to his car for a quick breather. Surely the other chaperones could handle things for a few minutes. The cool night air was a welcome respite from the stuffy gymnasium. Darren leaned against his beat-up Civic, fishing a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. He rarely smoked anymore, but he kept a pack on hand for moments of stress or boredom. Lighting up, he took a long drag and exhaled slowly, watching the smoke curl into the darkness. A rustling sound from nearby bushes caught his attention. Darren tensed, wondering if he'd stumbled upon some students engaging in illicit activities. He was about to investigate when a figure emerged from the shadows. "Mr. Thompson? What are you doing out here?" Miss Watkins stood before him, looking radiant in a form-fitting black dress. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders in loose waves, and her green eyes sparkled in the moonlight. Darren's heart skipped a beat as he scrambled to extinguish his cigarette. "Miss Watkins! I thought you couldn't make it tonight." She smiled, a hint of mischief playing at the corners of her mouth. "I managed to free up my schedule after all. I hope you don't mind that I crashed the party." "Not at all," Darren replied, perhaps a bit too eagerly. "I'm glad you're here. To be honest, I was starting to go a bit stir-crazy in there." Miss Watkins laughed, the sound like music to his ears. "Well, we can't have that. How about we liven things up a bit?" She produced a small flask from her purse, offering it to Darren with a conspiratorial wink. He hesitated for a moment, his responsible teacher instincts warring with his desire to impress her. In the end, temptation won out. "Why not? It's not like we're driving anywhere." Darren took a swig from the flask, expecting the burn of whiskey or vodka. Instead, he tasted something sweet and fruity with an odd metallic aftertaste. He raised an eyebrow at Miss Watkins. "What is this stuff?" She grinned, taking the flask back and helping herself to a generous sip. "Just a little something to help us unwind." Come on, let's head back inside before we're missed. As they walked back to the gymnasium, Darren felt a strange warmth spreading through his body. His skin tingled and the world around him seemed to shimmer slightly. He chalked it up to the alcohol hitting him harder than expected, grateful for the liquid courage as he followed Miss Watkins onto the dance floor. The next few hours passed in a blur of pulsing lights and thumping music. Darren found himself laughing and dancing with an abandon he hadn't felt in years. Miss Watkins stayed close, her body brushing against his in ways that sent shivers down his spine. As the final song faded out and the lights came up, Darren blinked in confusion. The gymnasium looked different somehow, the decorations more elaborate than he remembered. He turned to Miss Watkins, intending to comment on the change, but the words died in his throat. The woman standing beside him wasn't Miss Watkins at all. Instead, he found himself face to face with a stunning blonde in a cheerleading uniform. She grinned at him, her blue eyes twinkling with mischief. "Earth to Bianca, are you still with us?" Darren opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. His head spun as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Who was Bianca? And why did his body feel so strange? He glanced down at himself and froze in shock. Gone were his dress shirt and slacks, replaced by a cheerleading uniform identical to the blonde's. But more alarming than the outfit change was the distinctly feminine figure he now possessed. Panic rising in his throat, Darren stumbled towards the nearest restroom, ignoring the concerned calls of the blonde cheerleader. He burst through the door, barely registering that he'd entered the girls' bathroom in his haste. The face staring back at him from the mirror was both familiar and foreign. Soft feminine features framed by long chestnut hair had replaced his usual rugged appearance. Full lips parted in a silent gasp as she, raised a trembling hand to touch her reflection. "This can't be happening," Darren whispered, his voice now a higher melodic timbre. "I'm dreaming. I have to be dreaming." The bathroom door swung open, and the blonde cheerleader entered, concern etched on her face. "Bianca, honey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Darren, or was it Bianca now, struggled to form a coherent response. I don't know what's happening. This isn't me. I'm not supposed to be like this." The blonde's expression softened as she approached, placing a comforting hand on Bianca's shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. Just take a deep breath. Did you have too much to drink at the after party?" After party? Bianca's mind reeled, trying to reconcile her memories of chaperoning the dance with this new reality. She shook her head, fighting back tears of confusion and frustration. "No, you don't understand. I'm not Bianca. The words caught in her throat as a wave of dizziness washed over her. For a moment, the world seemed to flicker, like a glitch in a video game. When it stabilized, Bianca found herself overwhelmed by a flood of new memories. She saw herself as a little girl, twirling in a tutu at her first dance recital. Memories of sleepovers and shopping trips with girlfriends flashed through her mind. She remembered the thrill of making the cheerleading squad and the butterflies in her stomach before her first date with Grayson. Grayson. The name sent a jolt of electricity through her body. Images of a handsome boy with tousled dark hair and warm brown eyes filled her thoughts. She could almost feel the press of his lips against hers, hear the sound of his laughter. "Bianca? Do you need me to get Grayson?" The blonde's voice snapped Bianca back to the present. She blinked rapidly, trying to reconcile the conflicting sets of memories warring in her mind. Part of her wanted to scream that this was all wrong, that she wasn't supposed to be this person. But another part, growing stronger by the second, insisted that this was exactly who she'd always been. "No, I think I'm okay," Bianca managed, forcing a smile. Just felt a little dizzy for a moment. "Must be all the excitement from the dance." The blonde, Amber, Bianca's mind supplied, looked relieved. "Well, if you're sure. Come on, let's get back out there. Grayson's probably wondering where you disappeared to." As they exited the bathroom, Bianca caught sight of her reflection once more. The face looking back at her still felt strange, but less alien than before. She took a deep breath, steeling herself to face this bizarre new reality. The gymnasium was a whirlwind of activity as students helped break down decorations and clean up. Bianca scanned the crowd, her heart racing as she spotted Grayson across the room. He was laughing with a group of guys she recognized as fellow football players, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way that made her stomach flutter. As if sensing her gaze, Grayson looked up and caught her eye. His face lit up with a brilliant smile as he excused himself from his friends and made his way over to her. "There you are."
"I was starting to think you ditched me,"
he teased, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. Bianca tensed for a moment at the intimate contact before relaxing into his embrace. It felt right somehow, even as a part of her mind screamed that this was all wrong. "Sorry, just needed a little girl's room break," she replied, surprised at how easily the words came. "You know how it is after a few sodas," Grayson chuckled, pressing a quick kiss to her temple. "Well, I'm glad you're back. Some of us are talking about hitting up the diner for some late-night pancakes." "You in?" Bianca hesitated, torn between the desire to go home and try to make sense of what was happening and the pull of these new memories and emotions. In the end, the latter won out. "Sounds great," she heard herself say. "Just let me grab my things from the locker room." As she made her way through the crowded gym, Bianca's mind raced. What had happened to her? Was this some sort of elaborate prank or hallucination? And if it was real, how long would it last? She pushed open the locker room door, grateful to find it empty. Locating the locker that felt familiar, hers, apparently, she spun the combination lock with practiced ease. Inside, she found a duffel bag containing street clothes and her phone. Bianca changed quickly, trading her cheerleading uniform for a pair of skinny jeans and a soft sweater. As she zipped up the bag, her phone buzzed with a new message. She hesitated before unlocking it, part of her afraid of what she might find. The lock screen was a selfie of her and Grayson, both grinning widely at the camera. Bianca's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the image. They looked so happy, so natural together. How could this feel so real when just hours ago she'd been Darren Thompson, high school English teacher? The new message was from her mom, asking if she'd be home for breakfast in the morning. Bianca's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she debated how to respond. Should she play along with this new identity or try to explain the inexplicable situation she found herself in? Before she could decide, another message popped up, this one from Grayson. "Hurry up, slowpoke. The pancakes are calling our names." A smile tugged at Bianca's lips despite her confusion. She quickly typed out a response to both messages, promising her mom she'd be home and telling Grayson she was on her way. As she shouldered her bag and headed for the door, Bianca caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror. The girl staring back at her was undeniably pretty, with long chestnut hair, bright hazel eyes, and a smattering of freckles across her nose. She looked like the type of student Darren would have taught, not someone he'd ever expected to become. A lump formed in her throat as she thought of her life as Darren. It felt distant now, like a half-remembered dream. Would she ever get that life back? Did she even want to? Shaking off the melancholy thoughts, Bianca squared her shoulders and left the locker room. Whatever was happening, she'd figure it out. For now, she had friends waiting and pancakes to eat. The diner was packed with students from the dance, all chattering excitedly about the night's events. Bianca slid into a booth next to Grayson, hyper-aware of the warmth of his thigh pressed against hers. Across from them sat Amber and her boyfriend, Tyler. As they perused the menus, Bianca found herself falling into an easy rhythm of conversation. She laughed at inside jokes she shouldn't have known and chimed in with opinions on teachers and classes she'd never taken. It was as if two sets of memories were competing for dominance in her mind, with the life of Bianca slowly but surely overtaking that of Darren.
"So, are you guys ready for the big game next week?"
Tyler asked, his arm draped casually over Amber's shoulders. Grayson grinned, bumping his shoulder against Bianca's.
You know it. Coach has been running us ragged, but I think we've got a real shot at taking state this year.
And you girls are going to kill it with the new routine, Amber added, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Bianca, that flip sequence you choreographed is insane. The crowd is going to go wild. Bianca felt a surge of pride at the compliment, even as part of her marveled at the idea that she could do anything more athletic than climbing a flight of stairs. Thanks, Amber. I just hope I don't mess it up on game day. Are you kidding? Grayson squeezed her hand under the table. You're the most talented cheerleader on the squad. You'll nail it, just like always. The easy confidence in his voice made Bianca's heart swell. She leaned into him slightly, basking in the warmth of his praise and affection. As their food arrived, a towering stack of chocolate chip pancakes for Bianca, the conversation drifted to plans for the upcoming weekend. Bianca found herself agreeing to a movie night at Amber's house, followed by a study session for their calculus test on Monday. It wasn't until they were finishing up their meals that Bianca noticed a familiar face at a nearby table. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized Miss Watkins, looking exactly as she had earlier that evening in her black dress. Their eyes met across the crowded diner, and Miss Watkins's lips curled into a knowing smirk. She raised her coffee mug in a mock toast before turning back to her companion, a man Bianca didn't recognize. Earth to Bianca, Grayson's voice cut through her thoughts. You okay? You looked like you saw a ghost for a second there. Bianca tore her gaze away from Miss Watkins, forcing a smile. Yeah, sorry. Just thought I recognized someone, but I was mistaken. As they gathered their things to leave, Bianca couldn't shake the feeling that Miss Watkins held the key to understanding what had happened to her. She made a mental note to try and speak with her teacher alone as soon as possible. Outside the diner, the group said their goodbyes. Amber and Tyler headed off towards Amber's car while Grayson laced his fingers through Bianca's. Want me to drive you home? He offered, jangling his keys. Bianca hesitated. Part of her wanted nothing more than to extend this surreal evening, to bask in the comfort of Grayson's presence. But another part, the part that still clung to memories of being Darren, knew she needed time alone to process everything that had happened. Thanks, but I think I'll walk, she said, offering him a small smile. It's not far, and the fresh air will do me good. Concern flickered across Grayson's face. Are you sure? It's pretty late. I'll be fine, I promise. Bianca stood on her tiptoes to press a quick kiss to his cheek, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. I'll text you when I get home, okay? Grayson relented, pulling her into a tight hug before reluctantly letting go. Okay, if you're sure. Sweet dreams, beautiful. I'll see you tomorrow? Bianca nodded, waving as he climbed into his car and drove off. Once he was out of sight, she let out a shaky breath and began the walk home. The streets were quiet, most of the town already asleep. Bianca's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the evening's events. How had she gone from being Darren Thompson, high school teacher, to Bianca, teenage cheerleader? And more importantly, how could she get back to her real life? But even as she thought it, Bianca wasn't sure which life felt more real anymore. The memories of being Darren were growing hazier by the minute, while her life as Bianca felt increasingly vibrant and immediate. Lost in thought, she almost missed the sound of footsteps behind her. Bianca's heart rate spiked as she quickened her pace, cursing herself for insisting on walking home alone. She was about to break into a run when a familiar voice called out. Leaving so soon, Mr. Thompson? Or should I say, Miss Peterson? Bianca whirled around to find Miss Watkins standing a few feet away, a bemused expression on her face. The older woman's use of both names sent a jolt of recognition through Bianca, momentarily strengthening her memories of being Darren. Miss Watkins? Bianca breathed, relief and confusion warring in her voice. What's happening to me? What did you do? Miss Watkins approached slowly, her heels clicking on the pavement. I simply gave you a little push, Darren. The rest, that was all you... Bianca shook her head, frustrated tears pricking at her eyes. I don't understand. How is this possible? Why would you do this to me? Oh, Darren, Miss Watkins sighed, her tone almost pitying. Don't you see? This is who you've always been deep down. I just helped you embrace it. Before Bianca could respond, the world around her began to blur and shift. The quiet street melted away, replaced by the pulsing lights and thundering music of the school gymnasium. Bianca blinked rapidly, disoriented by the sudden change. She found herself back on the dance floor, surrounded by laughing, dancing students. Miss Watkins stood before her, but now she wore a mischievous grin instead of her earlier mysterious demeanor. "Gotcha, Mr. Thompson," she exclaimed, barely containing her laughter. "You should see the look on your face." Confusion gave way to dawning realization as Darren, for he was Darren again, took in the scene around him. The elaborate decorations, the cheerleader uniforms, even Grayson and the others, all of it had been an elaborate prank. But how? Darren stammered, his mind reeling as he tried to separate reality from the vivid hallucination he'd just experienced. Miss Watkins, Amanda, he reminded himself, grinned wider. "Remember that special drink I gave you earlier? Just a little harmless concoction to make you more susceptible to suggestion. The rest was all in your head with a little help from our drama club's expert actors." As if on cue, Jessica Chen appeared at Amanda's side, still wearing the blue dress from earlier, but now sporting a triumphant smile.
Sorry, Mr. Thompson. It was all in good fun, I promise. You have to admit, it was a pretty impressive performance, right?
Darren's head spun as he tried to process everything. The prank had been so elaborate, so real. He could still feel phantom sensations of Bianca's body, still taste the chocolate chip pancakes on his tongue. But why? He managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Why go to all this trouble? Amanda's expression softened slightly. Consider it a thank you for covering the dance and maybe a little nudge to loosen up and have some fun once in a while. You're always so serious, Darren. We thought you could use a bit of excitement in your life. As the initial shock wore off, Darren found himself caught between indignation at being the butt of such an elaborate joke and reluctant admiration for the sheer creativity and effort involved. He ran a hand through his own hair, he noted with relief, and let out a shaky laugh. "I have to hand it to you all," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "That was something else. Though I'm not sure I'll ever be able to look at cheerleading the same way again." The tension broken, Amanda and Jessica dissolved into giggles. Soon, Darren found himself laughing along with them, the absurdity of the situation finally hitting him. As the dance wound down and students began to file out, Darren helped with the cleanup, his mind still reeling from the evening's events. He couldn't shake the lingering sensations of his time as Bianca. The feel of Grayson's arm around him, the camaraderie with the other cheerleaders, the exhilaration of performing. Part of him mourned the loss of that other life, as brief and illusory as it had been. But another part, a part he'd long ignored, felt awakened by the experience. As he said goodnight to Amanda and the last of the students, Darren made a silent promise to himself. He might not be Bianca, but perhaps it was time to embrace a little more excitement in his life. After all, who knew what other surprises might be waiting just around the corner? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.